Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's good to see you all. I, first of all, would like to wish all of our Canadian friends happy Thanksgiving weekend. And I think it's a long weekend in the States as well. So happy long weekend to all of our American friends. So I'm really delighted to have Katherine Gray as our guest today. Katherine is a Toronto girl. She is from Toronto and got her undergrad degree from the Ontario College of Art and went on to get an MFA from the Rhode Island School of Design. She presently is a professor of art at the California State University, and it's such a pleasure to have her here today. I really love Kathy's current work. It's very oops, I can't even say that. The objects are simple. I'm tongue twisted today, but they're uncommonly beautiful. I find them to be so breathtaking, and the colors shimmer, they're iridescent, and I find I'm just really drawn into the work. On the other hand, she's pretty diverse. One of my very favorite pieces at the Corning Museum, and again, I'm constantly drawn back to look at this piece, is a large-scale forest installation that Kathy has made with found objects. And it just gives the illusion of trees. It just draws you in. It's pretty remarkable. As I say, whenever I'm at the Corning Museum, I make my way to that sculpture right away. In 2007, Katherine received the Lubinsky Richthof Award, and that was from the Pilchuck Glass School. The other thing, she's a bit of a celebrity because Katherine is the resident evaluator on season 1 of Netflix series Blown Away. And from what I understand, season 2 is coming out very shortly. I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit about that. So this is a woman who is capable and able to do.
Oops.
It looks like we have lost Sandra. So what I'm going to do is I am going to throw this over to Katherine. So Katherine,
There.
it is great to have you here today.
Thanks. You know, Katherine, I have another son. He just called me. That's what happened. It's family day right now. Anyways,
because of Thanksgiving, probably.
Exactly. Anyways, it's so good to see you.
Thank you, and thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for allowing me to kind of share my studio and my work with your friends and supporters of the gallery. I'm currently sitting in my studio at Cal State San Bernardino, where I teach. I have a pretty good, reasonably sized studio space here that's really been instrumental in helping me able to continue to make my work. I'm going to start with sharing my screen and showing some slides, and some of the pieces are ones that Sandra just referenced, and give you a little bit more background of some of the other kinds of work that I do, and then show you some of the pieces that I have here in the studio. So let me just share my screen here. And I've got a little video to start, and just a tiny bit. There's a little bit of music in the background, but I'm pretty sure you can probably still hear me. This was filmed in the glass studio that's just across the hall from where I'm sitting right now. And where I blow glass. One of the most incredible things about being a glass blower is being able to work with lots of different people. And I've had, since I've been teaching here, I started here in 2002. One of the most rewarding aspects is being able to work with students and being able to mentor them in sort of, very intimate one-on-one situations where they help me blow glass. I want to point out a couple things. I'm sure most of you have seen glass blowing in some form or the other, but I wanted to just mention a few things that I'll reference again in some of the work that follows this. As you know, when you're working with glass, it's just way too hot to ever touch it with your hand. So you're constantly using a variety of tools to act as sort of extensions of your hands and fingers to shape and manipulate the glass. You know, on that little poof of smoke that you just saw is some wax that burns off. So there's a little pad of beeswax that's on the bench that lubricates a couple of the tools so they kind of glide over the glass. And, you know, I go back and forth all the time between a glory hole and the bench. And then there's also a furnace where, you know, the molten glass is kept. You know, the furnace and the glory hole both generate a lot of heat. So generally when you're working in a hot studio, it's hot because of all the equipment that's blazing away. And plus, you know, there's a lot of heat that comes off of the glass as well. You know, in this video, I'm making a few different pieces. It's, you know, it's a bunch of splices and edits from all on the same day, but just different things I was making for an exhibition. And some of these pieces you'll see again in some other images that follow. You know, it's been a real privilege of mine, I feel like, to be able to make my living as a glass blower. I would never have thought that it's afforded me the opportunities that I've had, you know, to teach and to travel, to work with so many amazing different people. You know, one thing that, I'm just gonna stop this for a second and we'll move on, that has been really incredible is, you know, just the opportunity to share all the knowledge that's been shared with me. You know, I feel like I'm a conduit. I don't want, you know, everything that people have shown me to kind of stay with me. And so I really have enjoyed teaching to be able to, you know, pay that forward and share that knowledge with the younger generations. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, sort of a slightly abbreviated version, I would say, of my typical sort of slideshow. You know, after I graduated from Rhode Island School of Design, I was back in Toronto. I worked at the Harbourfront Centre as a resident there for a few years and really started to invest my energy into trying to become a really good glass blower and working in the Venetian style, which is kind of characterized by working in a team, working with the glass really hot and really efficiently. You know, I wouldn't necessarily say that that is particular to like a Venetian style of working. You know, it's also similar in other traditions as well. But at the time, it was sort of the early years of Lino Tagliapietra teaching and working in the US. And so everybody was really hungry for those techniques and those opportunities. And, you know, everybody was trying to figure out how to work that in that way because it just was such a much more efficient way of working. I started making these candelabra as kind of in a way, kind of a skill building exercise to, you know, develop kind of, you know, skills that are like making goblets, but aren't exactly making goblets, working on a larger scale, assembling things hot out of the garage. You know, that was, you know, a really amazing experience. I was able to make these for centerpieces for the Pilchuck auction a few years. And that was really great. I also had like lots of other people helping me. So seeing how they kind of riffed on my ideas was really inspiring as well. But it's really easy to kind of get pigeonholed pretty quickly, I feel like, in the glass world, but even, you know, in the larger world as well. So, you know, pretty quickly, I kind of wanted to diversify and make other kinds of work. I moved to Seattle in 1996, in the fall of 1996. I actually thought I was only moving there for 3 months, and it ended up staying for about 6 years. And actually, after my residency at Harbourfront, I moved back to Providence to teach at RISD, also thinking that was only going to be for 3 months. And that's when I left living in Canada, and that was in 1994. So I would have never thought I would still be here all these years later. But back to the images. So I've also started making other kinds of tableware, things that are, you know, pseudo-functional, if you will. These cake plates. And, you know, a lot of these are inspired by, you know, domestic glassware and, you know, things like Corning and Fire King. You know, vintage glassware has always been really inspiring to me. And I also like working in this milieu of domestic glassware because you know, glass making is a very male dominated field. And I feel like there's this dichotomy between it as glass blowing as a craft, you know, and a lot of crafts seem like sort of very much more kind of women's work, if you will, but glass blowing isn't. But at the same time, I kind of wanted to inhabit this terrain that is kind of traditionally sort of female inhabited, if you will. So I was making cake plates. This was a body or a group of pieces that I made for a wedding themed show. It's called Forever and Ever. I wanted to make all the glass that a couple would need for their life together. So I was really thinking about, you know, same-sex couples or heterosexual couples and everything that they would ever possibly need, and try to stack it up and make it compact the way a lot of, you know, Corning glassware is, for instance. So within these 2 units, there's, you know, 2 goblets for, you know, toasting at the wedding, for instance. There's variations on, you know, 2 medium-sized plates, 2 large plates, bowls, cups, things that flip over and perform different functions. In the back is a dildo and a urinal, and then the container on the right can flip over, you know, so you have a jar with a lid to match the jar and the lid on the left, and you have urns for your ashes. So like I said, I was really thinking about everything people, all the glass a couple would need. This piece is the one that Sandra mentioned that's at the Corning Museum of Glass now. I was originally I was part of an exhibition at the Chrysler Museum of Art in Norfolk, Virginia, and inspired by the way they displayed their glass collection there, which was, it's since kind of that whole area has been remodeled, but you know, you see this in lots of different museums that have a lot of glass, where there's kind of glass behind cases and behind glass, in glass cases or behind glass panels. And you see a lot of reflections. And so I didn't include the photos here, but I have a few photos of, you know, where you see, you know, maybe some Roman glass is back here, but it's reflected on the glass, and you're looking at like English cut crystal, and then maybe through that you see, you know, Islamic glass or something. So I really liked how all of these types and eras of glass were kind of getting, you know, compressed in the picture plane. And then Norfolk is very close to Jamestown, Virginia, which was the first permanent European settlement in the New World. And one of the first industries they wanted to start there was glass making. They arrived and saw that there was a multitude of trees that could be cut down for fuel, and thought that glass making would be the perfect industry to start. And part of me was like, wow, that's cool that glass making is the first industry in the US or in America at that time. But at the same time, oh, sorry, my lights just went out. At the same time, a little disheartening that the first thing they wanted to do was just kind of start clearing all the forests, which had been the practice in Northern Europe. And forest glass is a kind of glass made, you know, in the area of the Black Forest in Northern Germany, where glass houses would kind of move around once they'd kind of cut down all the trees and move to another area to start up again. So I wanted to reverse that and make trees out of glass instead of the other way around. And so these are all drinking glasses, you know, culled from thrift stores and eBay. And here you can get a better sense of the scale of the piece. So there's the trees with the green and brown glass, but then they're also kind of enshrouded in just clear drinking glasses to kind of mimic that sense of glass being in clear glass cases. And they're also a little bit foreshortened. They're not fully 3-dimensional, again, to kind of reference that sort of shortened picture plane of you know, looking at glass in a glass museum. There's definitely some things that reward you on close viewing. You know, there's some glasses that have, you know, enameled birds on them, for instance, and they're kind of up in the foliage area. And around the bottom, there's some glasses that maybe have some like mushrooms or wheat or grass looking things, patterns on them. And so I was really kind of trying to pay attention to all of that. But it did give me a renewed respect for all of the kind of manufactured glass that is out there. And it was also a little surprising that you know, people would be able to kind of pick out glasses that they recognized from, you know, their childhood or their grandmother's house or that kind of thing. So that was a nice connection to make with the audience. You know, at the same time I was making that piece, I was also, you know, still blowing glass and worked on this series of pieces, a combination of being the words tabletop and topiary, based on topiaries from the Palace of Versailles, but these are all made out of recycled glass, and then recycled in terms of the glass that we use in the furnace. I wasn't able to melt like beer bottles and wine bottles, for instance, but was trying to make these in a, make these sort of things that reference greenery in as green a way as possible. This piece is a bit more recent. This is maybe from 5 or 6 years ago. And one thing that I really was pleasantly surprised about forest glass, for instance, is the way the light kind of shone through the glass. It was all, like the light on the back wall really illuminated the piece. It was almost like stained glass. And I don't really do I don't do any stained glass. And, I've certainly looked at a lot of stained glass over the years. But I wanted to kind of revisit that idea of, typically stained glass, is in a church, the light of the sun or God shines through it and illuminates, stories from the Bible to maybe an illiterate or uneducated congregation. And I kind of wanted to change that dynamic and have the light coming from below, from the congregation, if you will, or from the populace, and shining up through the glass and making like this beautiful sort of spectral rainbow. So the glassware in this case is all hand blown, but typically kind of generic shapes, just, maybe a little bit noteworthy just because of the different colors to kind of generate that rainbow effect. Rainbows are pretty influential on a lot of my work and thinking sometimes. This piece is, as you can read, is called Broken Bow. It's just solid glass. It's, kind of a dismantled rainbow, if you will. I like rainbows in the fact that they are, something that really requires very particular set of conditions to exist. And I feel like that's emblematic of our existence here on Earth. This piece I started in 2016, which was the year of our last election here in the US. And initially inspired by, and maybe some of you have these in your homes, I believe they're just called greenhouse windows, the windows that kind of extend off the side of a house. And a lot of times I see people put, transparent glass colored bottles in their windows, and they look great. Transparent glass, backlit, always looks pretty amazing. But I always kind of wonder, it's a greenhouse, like, are people expecting the glass to grow or multiply in any way? And, it was, to my mind, this piece was kind of a reference to, something that seems kind of innocuous and benign, but as it sort of multiplies or builds a head of steam, becomes something that's much more malevolent. And in this case, even makes the window kind of non-functional. The black glass also is a reference to obsidian, which is a geological glass. It's very crude and not really workable as a glass in the way that you can't really blow it or do anything with it. You can chip at it, and a lot of arrowheads and that were made out of obsidian. And a lot of these forms are inspired by or based on designs by Frederick Carter, who was a very prolific designer for Steuben and Corning in the early 1900s, for about 50 years. So a lot of these forms wouldn't be anything that you would, if you saw them in clear glass, you probably wouldn't pay any attention to them. And so in the black glass, I really wanted to kind of give them this kind of presence and volume and kind of make it this sort of impenetrable wall. Underlying the fact that transparency is a construct and that can disappear pretty quickly. So I do a couple collaborations, or collaborate with a couple people is probably the better way to phrase that. And the last couple of years, I've been collaborating a lot with a good friend of mine, Nancy Callan. Some of you may know her. She's an amazing glass artist and an incredible glass blower. She's really known for what she does with cane. And we often talk, we both kind of work in sort of this, Venetian or Italian tradition, but make very, very different work. And she does amazing things with cane. And I don't hardly do anything with cane. I love working with cane, but don't, if I need things done with cane, I ask Nancy to make them for me. And, but we were kind of started to riff on these ideas of clowns. And there is a sort of tradition, if you want to call it that, or history of clowns being made out of glass in Venice. And, you know, initially some of the early ones are really very beautiful and very well made, beautifully crafted. And they kind of quickly devolve to being not so well made and, you know, just made very quickly for the souvenir market. And we kind of wanted to revitalize that trope, if you will. So we've kind of been riffing on this clown idea. This show was supposed to open actually today, but it was postponed because of this pandemic that's been going around. So I think the show is now going to open in the end of January at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art, just outside of Seattle, Washington. And hopefully it will travel as well. So we were working on a book for it as well. So we're really all in on this body of work. We have had a lot of fun working on it, and it felt really timely and very therapeutic for us to kind of get some of these ideas out, especially just considering the political environment here in the States right now. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of panels, wall pieces, but also some sculptural pieces as well. Here we've done some with some enameling and painting on the glass. And then I also collaborate with my partner Eric Hipsch, and we just recently kind of incorporated as an LLC for making sort of some housewares, some glass, some other materials as well. So these are some candelabra with glass bases, with some iridescent powders on the surface. And the actual candle holders we also fabricate. Those are made out of steel and are either gold or chrome plated. And I have some of those behind me. I can show a couple of those to you after we are finished looking at the slides here. A few years ago, I turned 50 and started thinking about the fact that I might not be a glass blower forever, not like be able to blow glass for forever, and started thinking about ways to recreate that experience. And you know, one thing, as I mentioned when we were watching that video about being in the hot shop, it's very warm in the hot shop, and it started making me think about being around a campfire. And so these are some stylized hearths. There's solid glass logs. There's clear and black. And you know, the idea of the campfire kind of made, and translating that into glass made sense to me, because you know, sitting around a campfire is like this warmth, like literal warmth, but also just generally a warm feeling if you're sitting there with friends and telling stories and having a good time. But, you know, now I feel like we do all of that around this kind of device, which is also made out of glass. And this is also one reason for the black glass as well. And then that's sort of our new campfire and our new way of kind of communing with each other. This piece is as a frosted surface, and this is what it looks like under regular light, and then it's made out of uranium glass, so under UV light it glows. So that's basically the same piece. And one prominent use of glass currently and probably into the future is using glass as kind of a receptacle for nuclear waste. So I felt like making this out of uranium glass seems kind of appropriate. Furthering that idea of trying to preserve memories from being in the glass studio, you know, there's a bunch of smells that are really, really particular to working in the hot shop. And, you know, initially I was just like, oh, I should maybe just see if I can get a perfumist to like make one of those smells. And then I started thinking, oh, you know, it would be really great to be able to share that experience with people. So it led to a kind of a bigger body of work, and also developing 4 different scents of things that you smell when you're in the hot shop. So the paper is, you know, we use sort of this pad of burnt up newspaper to sort of shape the glass with our hands. The sleeve is like a protective sleeve, you know, keep your skin cool. The wax is the beeswax that I mentioned that's on the pad, on the tool table. And then the block is, I didn't mention it when we were watching the video, but it's a wooden shaped kind of ladle-y looking thing that is kept in a bucket at the back of the bench that you bring out early on in the process to kind of shape and cool the glass a little bit after you gather. And anyways, this is an interactive piece, so when you walk up to it, the motions detector makes the diffuser just kind of release a little poof of the smell, and you put your face over this open-ended kind of bottle and get a whiff of that scent. And I also made little coffrettes there on the right of each individual scent. So far, only other glass blowers have been interested in those smells, but I do have those available if anybody is curious about those. I also made a sound piece, and if you recall, like all the different metal tools, the shears and the tweezers, one day when I was making a bunch of drinking glasses like this, I had little mics on each of the tools and then spliced together a soundtrack of that conversation of the tools interacting with the glass. And so you go up to it in the exhibition space and you can kind of eavesdrop on this sort of private conversation that happens.
That's pretty cool.
And then this is that pad of beeswax that sort of is used as a lubricant. I just cast it in, this is gold-plated bronze. And that pedestal is actually the same dimensions as the table where I have all my tools when I'm blowing glass. So it's kind of a little replication of that setup with the wax in bronze. These are two panels made out of blown glass in a traditional way of making a cylinder and cutting, making sure both ends are open and cutting a slit and then opening it up in an oven so it slumps out flat and you have a big panel. So then I cut out two shapes, one the shape of the glory hole and one of the furnace opening. And I was just starting to kind of play around with this iridescent coating that Sandra mentioned at the beginning. And so that is applied on these pieces. It's a little hard to see in a still image, but as you move across and around the piece, you see that the color kind of shifts and it starts to kind of glow this beautiful kind of gold color. This is the same kind of process, again, with blown glass kind of slumped open and that iridescence applied to it, kind of looking maybe like heat rings emanating from maybe like the glory hole, for instance, or your head as you're kind of thinking about ideas. But I started to really investigate that process a little bit more. It's a step that I don't actually do. I have to take it somewhere. It's this kind of really crazy machine that these pieces get put inside of to have this coating applied. And, so I have felt like my job in this process has been to figure out ways to really capitalize on the beauty of that process. And so I've been developing and making different bowls and sort of semi-functional kind of pieces and wall pieces as well. And then we'll have a look at some of the ones behind here. So sometimes I will make a form in the hot shop and then slump it in the kiln afterwards, after cold working it, for instance. And that's the case here. So that indentation in the middle comes down and just sort of barely touches sort of the bottom of that piece on the inside. And then this is my last image. And then, so as Sandra mentioned, I had this incredible opportunity to work on this Netflix series. And it was kind of out of left field. But then, once I kind of got more involved in it, I sort of realized I'm perfect for this role as being the resident evaluator. I have to walk around and talk to glass blowers about what they're making and then critique their things afterwards. And I was like, this is what I do in my day job as a professor, basically, is exactly that. And so it was really pretty amazing. I think along with a lot of the glass blowers, I was very skeptical about the proposition at first, about being involved in a reality TV show. I think we were all a little bit apprehensive about how we would be portrayed, or if it was going to, if we were going to be encouraged to kind of scream at each other and just exhibit really poor behavior, because that's not really reflective of the glass world at large, I would say. And, I made it very clear with them that I did not want to be involved if that was what they were after. And they, of course, told me what I wanted to hear. It's like, no, we really want the drama to be in the glass blowing and all that kind of stuff. And so I agreed and said yes. And, they take, I don't know how many thousands of hours of footage, and I'm sure they could edit it in myriad different ways. But in the end, I feel like they kept to their word. I mean, certainly there was some drama between some of the contestants, certainly on season 1. But it was all fairly genuine and all, you know, in keeping with, I think, with everyone's personalities for the most part. And I was really thrilled and really proud of the series when it came out. And it ended up being surprisingly popular, even I think by Netflix standards. It got an amazing amount of press. And there is a season 2. I'm probably really not supposed to say that. It hopefully is supposed to come out soon. But Netflix is very cagey, very, very cagey. Even the production company that produced this is, I think, can't believe how cagey Netflix is and how close to the chest they keep their cards about when things are going to be released. So I don't have a release date, but it has been filmed. We luckily finished filming right before the pandemic. So they've had lots of time to do the editing. And so if you haven't watched it, please do. It's streaming on Netflix. And then when season 2 comes out, I'm sure you will get some, you know, the trailer will pop up in your queue. So, so watch for that. And so that's the last image I have. Oop, where'd my mouse go? And I will, hang on here. Oh, there we go. Go back to this. And so if anybody has any questions, I'm not sure if you want to just shout them out, or we can do some Q&A afterwards, or maybe Sandra, if you want to advise, or I can also just show some of the things that I have here in my studio.
I'm going to step in right now, Kathy. We have a question from Jason, and Jason's asking about the piece in Corning. Is all of the glass in that piece found glass, or did you make some of the glass yourself for the installation?
For that piece, it was all found. So like I mentioned, all from thrift stores and eBay, and you know, friends in other parts of the country would go to their local thrift stores and buy the glass and ship it to me. In that though, surprisingly, there's actually a couple hand-blown glasses, but they weren't made by me. But yeah, generally it's all machine-made glass.
You
And
know,
then
I was going to say about that piece, because it does have huge impact. And even though it looked beautiful in your presentation, you really have to be there to see it. I found it so compelling. I want to look at it from as many angles as possible. It's very powerful. It's quite an amazing installation. Okay, go ahead.
I forgot to, thank you very much for that, Sandra. And I forgot to mention that, you know, for that one image where you see people looking at it, you get a sense of the scale of it. You know, one of the middle tree, I think, is about 12 feet tall. So definitely like the largest piece I've ever made. It was a rare opportunity, hopefully not the only time this ever happens, but the Chrysler Museum underwrote the creation of the piece. So otherwise I would never have been able to fund making something like that on my own. And so that was really an amazing opportunity.
Okay, Daniel, go ahead.
And Jason said he also saw your installation, or he saw it installed in Los Angeles, and he was always wondering about that.
Oh, wow, a fan. Yes, I had a show at a gallery here at Kuna Hansen Gallery, which unfortunately is no more. But yeah, I showed 2 of the trees at that exhibition. Yeah.
Good. Okay, is there any other questions now, Dan?
Not right now, no.
Okay, so we'll let you continue with your presentation.
Okay, well, this is my studio. I'll just move this out of the way here, and I'll go over on this side. So I tried to tidy it up a little bit. You can see that, you know, I've got kind of a lot of things going on way in the background, but I do have some of the iridescent pieces here in the front. And let me just put these gloves on. I have a ring on. I don't like handling these too much without gloves. Usually when people buy them and I ship them, I throw in some gloves for them. But
we'll have
for that sense of the iridescence on here. This is a white piece, and it's a little bit subtler, but it has like this amazing kind of glow to it. Here is a bluer one. These are just some things I've been kind of experimenting with. You know, this is a hollow kind of tube, and kind of thinking about glass as a membrane, and getting sort of the slightest suggestion of a vessel on it. So this is a lapis blue glass with the coating kind of on the top, and just a really slight indentation here. You know, some of them kind of reference the body a little bit, or could possibly. This piece I call iridescent slab. I don't know if this light is showing this, but you can kind of see a little bit how it's shifting color here.
Looks very satiny. It looks like it's satin.
It is, yeah. So all of these have a frosted sandblasted surface on the outside, and the inside is still glossy. And I call this one slab because it kind of reminded me of meat a little bit. And I've always had wondered this, but when you see iridescence on meat, I always sort of thought that was a bad sign, but it's actually perfectly natural. And something about the way that you cut through muscle will give you that iridescence. And here's, maybe I'll grab this one in the back and show that as well, another kind of tube piece. So some of the colors that you get on these are pretty incredible, and you know, from like looking at it from a short angle like that versus kind of straight on, it really can change quite a bit significantly as you move around. Unfortunately, I have only fluorescent light in the studio, so it's probably not the best light for these, but you know, it's nice that I have the opportunity to kind of show them to you and move around with them, because you get a better sense of how that color kind of shifts and changes. I like the fact that it's a little bit unknowable. You know, you think you know what color it is, but then you get closer or from a different angle, and you can't tell at all, or you're not sure anymore. Here's another one that I can show you.
I love that.
Yeah, so this is kind of a nicer one too. I made some of these forms. I had a residency a couple years ago at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, Washington, and was able to make a lot of these larger forms there with the crew there. They have a super team of glass blowers, and it was just super, super productive being able to make some of those pieces.
I see a bowl. Oh, there's a...
Yeah, I can bring that up too. Yeah, so this is, you know, sort of the shape that I started with was just, this is a double-walled bowl. Sometimes glass blowers call these sucked-in bowls or suck bowls. You know, I basically, there's a hole down here from being on the blowpipe, and I blow essentially a sphere and then flatten it, and instead of having somebody blow into the pipe, I actually ask them to suck air out, and it sucks this part of the glass in and makes this bowl shape. In some ways, I sort of feel like those are two wrongs making a right in terms of glass blowing techniques, but it has worked. I usually have to figure out a way, you know, for these things to get that iridescent coating, they have to be able to hang. And so having that double walled, you know, leaves an opening, so you can put some kind of device in there to be able to hang it. They hang in a chamber upside down, and then this iridescent coating comes spraying up from the bottom.
So how long do they have to stay in the container?
For that coating?
Yeah, that coating.
They're in there, you know, it goes up, I think it's a couple hours. I kind of just drop the pieces off and come and back and pick them up like a few days later. But I know you know, it heats up to about 300 degrees, and I'm not sure how long it actually takes for the coating process, and then it cools down again. I do lose pieces sometimes just because it shoots up to 300 degrees really quickly. So sometimes the glass wants to crack when you do that. So that's a bit of can be a problem. And, you know, and sometimes pieces just don't, you know, like I think they're going to look amazing if I've done something really crazy with the shape. And then they are a little underwhelming. And then other pieces that I think, oh, this is probably not going to look great, and they come back and they look amazing. So sometimes it's really, it's hard to know what is going to work. And I'm starting to figure it out a little better, but I'm still experimenting a lot. And actually, you know, these little pieces back here are some ones that I'm just made in the last couple of weeks that I'll sandblast and also get coated. So I've got like a little, you can see kind of a little hook loop on the back of those so that these can hang in the chamber when it gets coated. So those are some ideas. So I've kind of been playing with these things kind of overlapping, because then you could get this kind of different sort of effect of the coating in here when you have something that kind of shadows it a little bit. So I've been playing with that. And then these are some of the candelabra. And these are, you know, also inspired by these pieces. Maybe I'll bring this one over. You know, up close you can kind of see, you know, there's a bunch of different colors kind of dusted, you know, glass powder sort of dusted on here. So we've kind of been playing with that. And then, like I mentioned, these are gold-plated steel holding for the actual holding the candles. And, you know, we kind of see these as, you know, like be kind of used in groupings, you know, to kind of have, you know, a little story of candles. You know, one thing I forgot to mention in my talk is I started in glass at OCA because I thought I wanted to do furniture and lighting. And I took a glass blowing class because I thought, oh, it'll be good to know a little bit about working with glass if I want to design lighting. And I barely ever have done much lighting, as it turns out. But I have done a lot of candelabra over the years.
I love your candelabras. I like the really well. I like these.
Thank you. Yeah, now I sort of think, well, you know, candelabra are kind of lighting, so maybe I didn't veer as far from my original thought as I was thinking.
You know, we do have professional images of these pieces. So what we could do, Dan, do you want to put up the professional images so people can actually see what the pieces look like? Okay, so.
If you just give me 1 minute, Kathy, you can
Oh, sure.
continue
Yeah,
to show, and then
I can keep
pop them
Sorry, maybe I rushed you, but I realized it might be nice to let people see them up close.
Yeah, yeah. And if anybody has any other questions about any of these things or anything else that you can make out in the background here, please feel free to ask. I'm sorry, I know I have a camera but I'm also always looking at the laptop here because that's where you are. And one thing I realized when I did Blown Away, for instance, like, you know, I've been kind of used to people filming me or taking photographs when I'm blowing glass. Not so much when I'm like critiquing work, you know, so that took a little bit of getting used to. But one thing that I felt like saved me was that I never really have to look at the camera when we're filming Blown Away. Like I'm always just talking to people and, you know, cameras are kind of off in the distance and
right.
Easy to ignore. But now with this whole, you know, zooming and doing all of this stuff all the time, I realize I do have to like talk to the camera and it sort of unnerves me a little bit.
It's more intimidating, believe it or not.
It is.
Netflix, okay, good. And I probably jumped ahead and Daniel wasn't quite ready with the slides. Okay.
And I'm going to put those slides up right now.
Okay, thanks. They are so seductive. I'd like everyone to see them.
Yeah, and I'll bring this one over. This one's a little subtler. Was this pink piece? But you might have the images of this as well, I'm assuming. Maybe you start to see a little bit more of how it sort of glows and changes.
Well, it's really, the forms are so simple, but they just totally draw you in.
They do. They, especially I feel like the bowls, sometimes you just can't really tell like where the bottom is on there. You know, like you can't really make out where that surface is sometimes.
Like an optical illusion. Like that's
yeah.
so simple, but so beautiful.
Yeah. So. Oh, that piece I actually ran out of room, so I didn't pull that one out, but I do have that here. And I have made some for the wall as well. So that's, or pieces that could be either, like this white one here could either be on a tabletop or on the wall. Yeah, that's that pink piece.
Very beautiful.
Thank you. And that one is the one in the back there. I think I showed it to you. I feel like, unfortunately, that slide doesn't capture the iridescence on it as well. And some of the candelabra. So, yeah, we made those either for tea lights or for taper candles.
Right. I have a spot.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Just a little easier to see it because of the white cloth on the white. I do like the white piece right behind you, though.
This one here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Now, Kathy,
The white is my favorite, honestly. They really kind of just sort of glow in a weird way. You know, the darker colors, like the black and the lapis blue, the colors really definitely pop. But on the white, it's a lot subtler. But you know, on some angles, like the color just almost like completely disappears, and it's so mysterious. I kind of really like that. It's sort of definitely a bit of a, can be kind of a sleeper in terms of the effect of that iridescent coating.
now are the pieces coated before or after they're slumped?
They're after they're slumped. So that all of the cold working and shaping, slumping, all of that happens first, sandblasting, and then the last thing is the coating.
Okay. And I'm kind of intrigued at what's behind you, all those notes and messages and.
Oh, that's just my mood board. Just things I've cut, you know, things that have inspired me over the years, or things that I've kind of, you know, cut out of the newspaper or magazines or whatever. Yeah, just different things. I've got a whole piece over. For a little while, I was collecting old like Pyrex ads. You know, again, just kind of for inspiration, you know, like I love like these well, this one doesn't actually have the nesting. I guess this is sort of nesting, but you know, things that kind of fit inside each other.
Right.
You know, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of this stuff.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You move between, I mean, right now you're working mainly with these objects, more intimate objects with iridescent. What draws you back to, let's say, large scale installations, or do you move between the two?
I kind of try to move between the two. You know, I have been kind of concentrating on these a lot the last couple of years because, you know, they're a little easier, and to be perfectly honest, a little easier to show than the larger scale work. I mean, I really definitely need, you know, a particular kind of venue or exhibition for larger scale work. And, but it's not that I don't like think about those things all the time. I've actually been trying to figure out how to take this, you know, this particular technique onto a larger scale or incorporate it into a larger scale piece. I'm still kind of trying to figure that out, but we'll see how that goes.
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, and even, you know, making the candelabra, like making things that are much more, you know, functional and, you know, for the table kind of thing. I always feel like I've been a little bit, had a split personality between things that are functional and things that are sculptural. And sometimes those things come together, and, you know, they come together more often now than they used to, and that's been really nice. But for years, I sort of felt like I just sort of had two different kind of careers going in a way. So it's kind of nice to have things not be so separated.
How has COVID affected you? Because you're teaching at a state college, and
Yes.
your classes, or what impact has that had on you and your students?
A big impact. I feel like a little bit lucky compared to like what I know some of my colleagues around the country are dealing with, but at least my last class is hybrid. So one day of the week that we meet on Zoom, you know, we meet remotely. And then the other day we actually are on campus. But, you know, everybody is like very spaced apart. You know, we're working not as much in the hot shop. So we're doing a lot more kind of slumping, kiln casting, a little bit of lamp working and cold working. But really everybody's kind of all off doing their own thing in different, you know, at different tables in different areas. We can only have like 2 people at a time in the hot shop. And so especially with beginning students, usually one of those people is me, sort of showing them how to do things. so far I haven't been doing any blowing with them. We're just doing solid glass things, so we don't have to get into people blowing into blowpipes and that kind of thing. So it's been challenging. You know, I'm really glad that at least we have the access to some things on campus, and hopefully that will continue, you know, into next semester, and, you know, hopefully soon we have sort of a vaccine or not the same fear around the virus, but it's definitely been challenging, and I feel like it's going to have, and it has had a big impact just on the glass world in general, in schools or not, you know, thinking about public access studios and, you know, places like, you know, the Museum of Glass in Tacoma or the Corning Museum of Glass have really had to restructure some of their public facing programming around glass blowing because of the virus. So and I think it's been challenging for people to work, you know, or if you're used to working in a big team, I think people have really had to scale back and, you know, work with one, maybe two people, and, you know, keep that pod really tight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm glad you're at least able to do some work in the studio now. That's true.
I am. It has saved me mentally to be able to do that, for sure.
Sure.
If you would like to ask Kathy a question, you can either tap on the hand at the bottom of your screen and you can ask her directly when you're called upon, or you can use the Q&A feature as well at the bottom. So Kathy, Alan is asking, he says he thinks the clowns are absolutely wonderful. Do you have plans to continue the series with Nancy?
Probably. You know, we're just still kind of finishing up the last few pieces that we've kind of have dedicated for the exhibition that I mentioned. But we have really loved collaborating. We collaborated a little bit here and there before we started on this project. We always are in close communication about each other's sort of individual work all the time. So I'm really hoping that we will, and I'm sure she is too, we'll keep collaborating. It may not necessarily be on clowns. Maybe we'll go in a different direction. We'll see. But there's still a lot that we could do with the clowns as well. So we'll probably keep going.
Nancy's with us today, so I can tell she's shaking her head in agreement.
Nice. Hi, Callan.
I have a question just pertaining to Netflix. Have you been recognized on the streets?
Oh my gosh, I have, and I was shocked. I was recognized twice in pretty short succession after the show released last summer, and also both times very close to where I live. And the first time I just was walking home from the store, and there was like a little, you know, some people were sitting outside at a restaurant on the sidewalk, and somebody just screamed out, "I loved you on Blown Away." And I like looked around, I didn't even really could tell who screamed at me, and I just was like, "Thank you." And then it was like about to like enter the building where I live, and I was like, "Is this smart to do this, or should I maybe just kind of keep walking?" I didn't know. And then I was buying something in a store, and somebody just looked at me and was like, "Are you a glass blower by any chance?" And I was like, "Yes." And she's like, "I think I just saw you on a TV show." So, so those were the only two times. And like I said, that was pretty early on. So I was like, "Oh my God, is this what my life is going to be like now?" But thankfully for me, anyways, that hasn't happened since. I mean, that might happen again once the next season.
Season 2 comes out.
Yeah. I mean, I think somebody like Deborah Cheresco, I mean, she gets recognized all the time in New York City. And I think at first it kind of freaked her out, but I think she's really started to embrace it. And you know, she has a huge following.
That's great.
We've heard from a few of the Canadian artists who've appeared on the show that it's had just an incredible impact on their career. And
oh, definitely. I would say the same for all of the contestants, especially the ones that kind of lasted longer on the show. It's been a huge impact. And I feel like it's been an impact on my career, you know, maybe not to the same extent, but certainly, you know, I'll take it. It's been awesome.
What impact has it had on you?
Oh, just people reaching out and being interested in my work, you know, selling more work.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. It has related to sales. That's good for you. That's great.
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, I'm not on social media a ton, but, you know, there was a lot of, and maybe some of you know this, but there was a lot of negative feedback about the show, or about, you know, who should have won. There's people in both camps, and I was shocked about the amount of pretty vitriolic emails I would get. And I actually at some point had my boyfriend start to screen emails for me. I mean, it's died off, but I was shocked. And I asked Nick Uhas, who is the other host on the show, like, did you get any of that? And he's like, oh yeah, it's normal. That happens all the time. And I was like, wow, I wish somebody would have warned me.
Not in the world you came from.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Okay. Dan, do you have some more questions?
Yeah, Caroline's asking you, you briefly touched on being a woman in a male-dominated medium.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe just touch on that a little more, maybe?
Sure. I mean, this is always, it's a tricky one for me to answer because in a lot of ways, I personally feel like, especially working in studios, you know, it's been a long time since I've worked for other people. For instance, I've been an educator now for almost 20 years. And so I was much younger when I was doing all of that. And I can't really say that I felt like I was sort of discriminated against or there was, you know, open sexism or anything like that. I mean, I'm also, it might not be evident in the image, but I'm a 6 foot tall woman. So I feel like that has enabled me to maybe like bypass a lot of kind of attitude or comments that probably somebody a lot shorter would experience. You know, especially if I'm like taller than a man, it's not likely he's gonna try to diminish me with, you know, some silly comment. That's not to say I don't think that there is sexism in the industry. I think there is. I think there's an awareness of it that people are trying to remedy at this point. But I do remember years and years ago, I was actually making my first trip to Venice and going into a studio. I had somehow, like with my broken Italian, was able to make my way to a studio where a really respected goblet maker by the name of Caramea was blowing glass one day. And, you know, this woman opened the door when I knocked on it, and I just was like, Caramea? You know, I come to watch Caramea kind of thing. And, you know, she sort of just kind of beckoned me and directed me over here, and I walked in and sat, you know, was just kind of standing in this hot shop, and there's like all these guys running around. You could see Caramea working. And I speak a little French from being in Canada, and there was actually one of the Venetian glassblowers had lived in Montreal at one point, and so he also spoke French, and so we communicated a little bit in French, and he brought me a chair to sit down, and you know, we were just kind of talking a little bit, you know. He asked me what I did, and I was like, I told him I was a glassblower kind of thing, and I don't think he believed me at all. And then when Caramea was like doing like a few sort of critical things, I would kind of like lean in or like write some notes down and stuff like that. And they just all started kind of looking at me like, what the, like, how does she know like what he's doing and why that is important or that kind of thing. And then they were, I mean, the one guy still was really chatty to me, but everybody else just got really, really suspicious that I would actually be a glassmaker. And I was like, dudes, come on, you know?
So,
like,
how many years ago did you say that was? How many years ago?
That would have been 98.
98.
Yeah, so 22 years ago. It's not that long ago, but a while ago.
No, but you see a big change since 98?
I have, yeah, and especially when we were there a couple of years ago for the conference in Murano, I felt like there was a sea change of just like acceptance and understanding of like women working in the hot shop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. You've made a great career, and you've been a delightful guest today. It's been wonderful, Kathy. I'm so glad we came to see you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for coming.
And one of these days, when there is no COVID, I'm sure you'll come back to Toronto.
I definitely will.
I'm sure you'll come and visit me at the gallery.
Sure, yeah.
I really enjoy having your pieces there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know, I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Long weekend in LA.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.